I see the light, and I see the sea. Despite the future crashing down and closing over me, I got power over all my enemies. Listen to the martyrs cry for me, and I see the light, and I see the sea. The sun is going down, but everyone is burning. Ooh, I see the written on the other side of history. Listen to the martyrs cry for me.
I see advertising as the kind of horrible glue that holds the whole nightmare together, you know? Everything from military recruitment through to mass consumerism, global warming, it's all made worse by relentless, polluting messaging that corporations are bombarding us with.
We're all conditioned from a very young age to follow the rules and conform, and how do you avoid looking at bus stops or looking at the ads on the tube? It's impossible. It's not like something on the page in a magazine or whatever where you can choose not to buy the magazine. You can't really choose not to see bus stops.
I always felt it as an aggression, as a violence. It's the fact that it's a visual violence doesn't make it less a violence, because it imposes a certain idea of reality, which I don't feel like my own. When I realized that we could actually make something of our own, it gave me an idea of liberation.
My involvement with subvertising and activist design, I think, started in around 2000 with meeting Adbusters. And really seeing that magazine, it was pre-internet, it was like someone suddenly had told me the truth, working so closely in an area associated with advertising, and simply with the idea that actually these people were liars and had no morals. I've really felt that I should be doing something a bit more honest, not compartmentalising what I do, because I believe that serves society no purpose.
A lot of my activism I would kind of classify as direct action. So I see street art as a direct action, basically reclaiming public space and using it to tell people about stuff they should know about. Like street art, I guess, can be used that way. And I think that's what really inspired me in Athens. A lot of the street art there was really overtly political. But I think maybe a lot of the street art here is less so. It doesn't mean I have a problem with it, but I just think it's quite a different thing, I think.
So the motivation for subvertising is certainly to challenge the dominance of outdoor advertising, of corporate messaging in public space. That's always a beautiful kind of side effect of taking down an advert and putting up a political message or a piece of artwork. By doing so, you challenge that kind of dominance, and you start to kind of have a conversation about the legitimacy of corporate messaging in public space. One of the brilliant things about putting a subversive message in what is now a very comfortable place, people are so familiar and sadly very comfortable with corporate messaging and advertising. When you mess with that, it can be a very powerful tool. It can really sort of send a bit of a jolt into the brain.
Subvertising is basically about reclaiming the freedom to communicate. We're very familiar with the freedom of speech, but the freedom to communicate is something that's reserved for corporations and for very rich individuals. Like if you've got enough capital, you can buy a newspaper and you have the freedom to communicate to millions. I think with subvertising, it's about reclaiming these spaces that generally used for corporations to talk at us and shout at us, and going, actually, no, that belongs to us as well, and I've got something to say in this space. And it democratizes communication.
I think really where subvertising has worked is it uses those very seductive tools that assault us every day from advertising and turns it against itself. Firstly, it reveals how much we are coerced into certain opinion making, certain choices. Secondly, it really hits home messages which are the exact opposite in an equally effective way. So it's a really important area of activism. For me also, the interesting thing is the double take. When people see an advert and they think it's an authority, it's a commercial authority, but actually has a completely contrary and usually much more honest and truthful message, it really is an effective way of getting to people.
I understood from the beginning that it was something political, and so I was really frustrated about how street art started to be used by media, by people who want just to make profit. Subvertising was the consecution of this reasoning. There is no more space around, so we have to take it back from the brands.
There's definitely, there's an artistic element to it, like I want things to look good. And I think like they have to kind of look good to be effective. So it's kind of part of the same thing anyway, but it's inherently political and the politics is the main thing.
There's like a rich culture or tradition of subvertising that goes back to the 1960s, and you see different movements throughout the decades in different parts of the world kind of using this tactic. And so in the workshops we kind of do a little history lesson and kind of chart all the different movements that have used it through the years, and it's really like inspirational way of kind of feeling like you're part of a broader movement. It's great when people at the end of a workshop come away and they get tooled up, they know what they're doing, and you kind of pass on, and you show how easy and normal it is. That's what makes it really worthwhile.
To me, the act of doing something illegal, which is subvertising, is absolutely morally a valid thing to do, because not everybody wants to hear what the mainstream has to say, and it's getting an idea onto the agenda which is what changes society. And usually when that idea is first stated, it's proclaimed a heresy. When you take over a billboard, you take over an advert space on a bus shelter, it's illegal. That means it can only be up there a few hours, but that few hours is very important, because as soon as something like that happens, it gets into the media. And the amount of people that talked about it and discussed it, I suppose, far exceeded the amount of time that it was actually up. So those acts, they may not last long, but they are extremely important.
It should be a legal defence because you're reducing harm. I think any time that you take an advertisement off the street, you're helping tidy up visual pollution. You're tidying up the kind of psychological nightmare that is the kind of assault on people's psyches by corporations. I think it's definitely morally or ethically defensible, because it's very hard to ethically defend advertising itself.
It really does depend on the circumstances of the case, but you can see that there would be an argument under Articles 10 and 11, freedom of expression and freedom of speech, that people should be entitled to post their own views, much like an advertising company is making all sorts of claims, many of which may be exaggerated at best. That there should be a counter view to oppose that. So although there is that argument, you come back to the baseline, which is the criminal law, and whether a threshold has been crossed as to whether somebody or individual or group should be prosecuted. What's the difference between that and, say, Private Eye or any programme that you watch, Mock the Week, or any of those political parodies or statements? That's why it's very hard to give firm, hard and fast advice. If you do this, you'll get prosecuted. If you do that, you won't get prosecuted. Because there's always this greyness, there's blurriness in between, that it kind of does depend.
I've done a bunch of things about the army, but then I became aware of the fact that nuclear submarines were actually one of the most dangerous places to be in a nuclear war. Because of the certainty that the crew of nuclear submarines would actually die in a nuclear war, led me to the conclusion that they were actually suicide bombers, and I just thought that was worth kind of bringing out a bit. And so I made these adverts for the Royal Navy to recruit suicide bombers for the Royal Navy to work on the Trident submarines. Somewhere around 10 or 12 of them were actually printed and put up around London. But that one got me my first proper death threat, which was nice. Just mark that one off on the scout badge for getting a death threat.
Certainly for me, the royal family has always been a point of discussion, let's say, that always inherited privilege means unfairness. The whole class system in this country comes from the royal family, and until that goes, we won't get rid of the class system. So, having actually done some work previously about the royal family, rephrasing Ian Bone's post another fucking royal parasite, it just seemed to me that this was something I felt very strongly about and would like to have a go at again, because I really do feel quite angry about this.
A slogan will come to me and I'll go, right, that works in that situation or against that thing, or it works on a lamppost, or it works in a bus stop. When they were looking to rehouse the Grenfell survivors, the proposal came up that why don't we use all this, what a crazy idea, why don't we actually use all this empty property that people are just sitting on for some people who have been through a horror show. I thought, well, let's look at where these places are and see if there's a bit of a story behind them. I was like, wow, this is like 2 months nearly after the initial newspaper report, the places are still empty. These buildings are still empty. It's criminal. So I thought, oh, maybe this will get a bit of traction online and, flag it up again. To put a compulsory purchase on there this is what should be happening. In an ideal world, we should be able to say, this property's empty, we're in an emergency situation, let's take this property back, for the greater good.
So this one is about this arms fair that's coming up in September, 4th to the 11th of September in East London. They're going to have this arms fair that they have every 2 years, where arms companies sell their stuff to some of the regimes around the world with the worst human rights records you can imagine. So a lot of protesters want to say this shouldn't happen, London shouldn't be hosting this. So yeah, it's basically going to be a poster to let people know this is happening and to tell them they should kind of mobilise to help try and stop it. It might only last, I've had ones that have only lasted like a couple of hours. either because someone's reported them or it's just unlucky that, you know, the person came to change the ads.
It's interesting what happened to us recently in Italy. We were accused because of some designs that we put inside bus shelters of Article 403, which is offense to our religion, so blasphemy.
There's a song that says that. Well, walking in space comes pretty close. I mean, it's all based on...
So our design was described as illegal.
That happened because it wasn't a bus stop. It had the appearance of something official. Because if it would have been just stuck up on a wall as a poster or something, it wouldn't have had the same impact on the media and on the institutions, obviously. So that poses the question of who decides what is a legal image and who decides what to put up in the streets. Why are shampoo ads legal and someone else illegal?
There is gonna be a trial because of the content of the image.
We see it as an opportunity to as you were saying before, to bring the discussion to another level.
Subvertisers for London did the attack campaign and I thought it was really interesting and that I really wanted to get involved with it. My design is about gentrification. Being from South East London, I've seen it happen in East London, and growing up around here, I am seeing it change a lot. It affects a lot of people that I know. The finger is often pointed at the wrong person. It's always pointed at kind of the hipsters, people that own coffee shops, people that are selling craft beer. Those are not the ones that are forcing people out of the area. It's the property developers that are literally forcing people out of the area. I want it to be informative and I want people to understand what's going on and maybe to act upon it. Through freedom of information, you can demand for a viability assessment, which is the form that allows property developers to basically tell the councils that it's not viable for them to build social housing in these flats. And if you demand for these, you can kind of see what's going on because it seems to go on behind closed doors quite a lot. So it's just a kind of food for thought, I guess, in a public place that's worth reading about.
And some level, it's just making a kind of public statement, this is not okay. As difficult as it is to change people's minds, I think it's important to try, but it's also important to reassure the people who do believe in things like social justice and kind of rolling back some of the extremes of capitalism at the very least. So I think that if you can make them laugh, then especially about one of these issues, then you've kind of got them to agree with you, at least that there's something absurd about what you're pointing out.
When you do a piece of activist work, you know, the process is complex. The process of creating it is complex, about what decisions you make and what messages you put out. But its effect is complex as well. Now, I don't expect people to suddenly change their opinion. And how does that piece of work affect society? It's very difficult to say. I think all you can hope for is that you are one of many voices that does get something onto the agenda, and that's all I can hope for.
When you go back and do a victory roll past the billboard you've done, brilliant. You know, and then especially if you come back the next day and it's still there, you know, that's why I take ages poring over what it is I'm saying, because I don't want it to be misread. That's one of the best things that can come out of what I do. Someone's laughed, been inspired to go and do something themselves, maybe change the opinion of someone, but I don't know.
night.
There is definitely an empowering thing to it, because you can often feel powerless in the face of all of this stuff that's going on, whether it be an arms fair or whether it be the everyday abuses that lots of people in our world face. Yeah, you can feel completely powerless and unable to do anything about it. So it is an empowering thing to do.